Ryan sat inside the small cockpit of his cargo ship and stared at the blinking red light on the control panel. It was the warning that never left him alone. His ship had been damaged 2 weeks ago when he flew through a debris field. Since then, energy levels were dropping and food supplies were thinning. He was alone in the far edges of space where no one came willingly. The stars outside the window looked endless, but to Ryan they only reminded him of the silence that followed him everywhere. He leaned back in the chair and rubbed his tired eyes. The cargo hold was empty except for a few sealed containers of dried food and water. He had been delivering supplies to a distant colony before the accident forced him off course. Now he was stranded, moving from one barren moon to another in search of anything useful. The ship's sensors beeped suddenly, pulling him out of his thoughts. The display showed faint energy readings on the surface of a small rocky moon nearby. Ryan narrowed his eyes. Most of these moons were lifeless, but sometimes he found scraps left behind by travelers. He decided to land and check. The ship descended slowly, the engines whining as dust and rocks scattered below. When the ship finally touched down, Ryan grabbed his pack and stepped out into the harsh landscape. The ground was gray and cracked, and the air was thin but breathable with his mask. He moved carefully, scanning the horizon. At first he saw nothing but empty rocks and shadows. Then he froze. A sound carried through the thin air, faint, shaky, almost like a voice. He turned quickly, his hand reaching for the small plasma cutter on his belt. The sound came again, this time clearer. "Please, help," Ryan's heart raced. He followed the sound until he reached a cluster of jagged stones that formed a shallow cave. Inside, huddled against the wall, was a figure. It was a woman, not human but humanoid enough that he could read the desperation on her face. Her skin was pale with a faint silver hue, and her eyes glowed dimly in the darkness. Beside her were 3 smaller shapes, children who clung to her arms with weak movements. The woman looked up at him, her voice trembling. "My children, they have not eaten for days. If you feed them, I will be yours forever." Ryan froze at her words. He had met many species during his travels, but none had ever begged him like this. The children's faces were thin, their bodies frail. They looked too weak to even stand. His first thought was suspicion. Was this a trap? Some species use tricks to lure travelers into danger. But then he looked again at the children, their eyes glassy with hunger, and something in him softened. He knelt slowly, keeping his voice calm. "I have some food. It's not much, but it should help." The woman's eyes widened with a mix of relief and disbelief. She nodded quickly, holding her children close. Ryan opened his pack and pulled out sealed ration bars. He broke them into smaller pieces and handed them one by one. The children reached out with trembling hands, biting into the food with quiet desperation. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft chewing of hungry mouths. The woman lowered her head, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you." Ryan studied her carefully. Her clothes were torn, little more than scraps of fabric. She looked exhausted, as if she had carried her children across endless distances. Her body was thin, but her eyes burned with fierce determination to keep her little ones alive. "What happened to you?" Ryan asked softly. She hesitated, then spoke with a voice filled with pain. "We are all that is left. My people were hunted, our homes destroyed. We ran, but the stars are cruel. We had no food, no shelter. I thought my children would—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Ryan felt the weight of her words. He had heard stories of empires crushing smaller races, stripping their resources and leaving survivors to starve. But seeing it here so close shook him. He reached into his pack again and gave them water. The children drank eagerly, their small eyes flickering with new life. The woman placed her hand on Ryan's arm, her touch trembling. "You saved them." "I cannot repay this," Ryan shook his head. "I didn't do it for payment. No one deserves to starve." Still, she repeated softly, "I will be yours forever. My life belongs to you now." Her words unsettled him, but he understood they came from desperation and gratitude. He looked at the weak figures before him and knew he could not walk away. His supplies were limited, but leaving them here meant certain death. "We can't stay on this moon," Ryan said firmly. "Come with me." "My ship isn't much, but it's better than this place." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She gathered her children, lifting the smallest one in her arms. Together they followed Ryan out of the cave. The sight of them stumbling across the rocky ground stirred something deep inside him. When they reached the ship, Ryan helped them climb aboard. The children looked around with wide eyes, curious even in their weakness. He guided them to the small sleeping area and gave them blankets. The woman sat with them, her hand never leaving theirs. "What is your name?" Ryan asked. "Mira," she answered quietly. He nodded. "I'm Ryan." Mira bowed her head slightly. "Ryan, I will never forget this." Ryan looked at the small family huddled together. His ship was already struggling, and taking them with him would only make survival harder. But he could not turn away. Humanity had taught him many lessons, and one of them was simple. No matter how dark the stars became, compassion was a light that must never fade. As the engines roared to life and the ship lifted off the barren moon, Ryan glanced back at the rocky surface. He had landed expecting nothing but scraps. Instead, he had found a promise, a family in need, and a bond he had never expected. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in weeks, Ryan felt a purpose beyond his own survival. And so, with Mira and her children aboard, the lonely human traveler set a new course into the unknown stars, unaware of how deeply this single act of kindness would change his fate, and perhaps the fate of many more. The ship drifted through the quiet lanes of space, its engines humming with tired effort. Ryan sat in the pilot's seat, eyes fixed on the stars, while his thoughts turned again and again to the passengers now resting in the small sleeping area. He had taken risks before, but never like this. He had brought strangers aboard, and not just strangers, but a woman with 3 children who depended on him now. His supplies had been meant for one person. Now they were stretched across 4 more mouths. Still, when Ryan thought about leaving them back on that dead moon, he felt his stomach tighten with guilt. He had done the right thing. At least he hoped so. He stood and walked back to check on them. The ship was small, and it only took a few steps before he reached the narrow living space. Mira sat on the floor with her children curled against her. They were wrapped in blankets, their tiny breaths steady at last. For the first time since he had found them, they looked calm. Mira's eyes lifted as Ryan entered, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. "You should rest," Ryan said quietly. "I will when they sleep," Mira answered in a soft voice. She smoothed her hand over the hair of the smallest child and looked back at Ryan. "I want to thank you again. They were close to—" Her voice caught. She shook her head and did not finish. Ryan leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "You don't have to thank me. Just tell me how you ended up there. I need to know what we're dealing with." Mira hesitated, glancing at her children as if afraid that speaking the truth might wake them. Finally, she nodded. "My people are called the Alari. Once we lived on green worlds with rivers and skies full of song. But the Empire came. They wanted what we had, our land, our energy, our knowledge. They took it all. They broke our cities, burned our homes, and carried away many of our people. The rest of us ran. We thought we could find new homes among the stars, but the Empire hunts us still." Her voice was steady, but Ryan saw the pain in her eyes. She had lived through the fall of a world, and the weight of that memory clung to her. "Why hunt you?" Ryan asked. "The Empire already has more than it can ever use." Mira looked down at her hands. Her fingers trembled as she whispered, "Because of what lies within us. My people carry a gift. Some call it power, others call it danger. The Empire fears it, so they would rather erase us than risk our strength rising again." Ryan frowned. He wanted to ask more, but he saw the way Mira's shoulders tightened, and he decided not to push her further. Instead, he pulled a ration pack from his belt and handed it to her. "Eat something. You need strength too." Mira looked at the packet, then at him. For a moment she seemed ready to refuse, but hunger won over pride. She nodded once and opened it carefully, eating in small bites while keeping her children close. Ryan returned to the cockpit. He sat down, staring at the stars again, but this time the silence felt heavier. He had stumbled into something bigger than he expected. The Alari were not just refugees. They were fugitives hunted by one of the most ruthless powers in the galaxy. Keeping Mira and her children aboard was not only a strain on his supplies, it was a risk that could put him directly in the Empire's path. But when he thought about Mira's words, about the way she had begged him for her children's lives, he knew he would not turn back. He had made his choice the moment he broke the ration bar in that cave. Hours passed before Ryan heard soft footsteps behind him. Mira stepped into the cockpit, her arms folded tightly as if to shield herself from the cold. "Thank you again," she said. "The children sleep." They will wake with hope because of you. Ryan glanced at her. They'll need more than hope. I don't have enough food to last long. We'll have to find a station or a safe planet soon. Mira lowered her head. I understand. I will help however I can. My people know the hidden paths of space. There are places the Empire does not see. I can guide you. Ryan studied her, surprised. You trust me enough to share that? Mira's eyes met his, steady despite the weariness in them. You gave my children life when no one else would. I will trust you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Then Ryan nodded. All right. We'll find one of those hidden paths. Show me where. Mira leaned over the console and pointed to a cluster of stars. There. Beyond those lights lies a world that still remembers my people. It is not safe for long, but it may give us rest. Ryan adjusted the course, watching the stars shift across the screen. A new direction, a new purpose. He felt a strange sense of calm, as if for the first time in weeks he was no longer drifting without aim. As the ship slipped into the path Mira had shown, Ryan glanced at her again. She sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the stars, but her expression was not hopeless anymore. It carried a spark, faint but alive. The journey stretched on. The children woke and ate small meals, their faces slowly gaining color. They clung to Ryan whenever he brought food, their trust in him growing with each passing hour. He was not used to such closeness. He had spent years traveling alone, carrying goods from one world to another, never staying long enough to form bonds. But now these small lives looked at him with eyes full of need and gratitude. It stirred something inside him he had long forgotten. One evening, as the stars glowed bright against the dark, Mira spoke again. You are different, Ryan. Many see us as burden, as danger. But you gave without asking. Ryan shrugged. I just did what anyone should do. Mira shook her head gently. No, many turn away. You did not. That is why my words remain true. My life is yours now, Ryan frowned. I don't need anyone to belong to me. I just need you and your children safe. Mira smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in her eyes. Perhaps safety will be more than belonging. The words stayed with Ryan long after she returned to her children. By the time the hidden world appeared on their screens, the ship's fuel reserves were thin. Ryan guided the vessel through a narrow belt of stones, each one glowing faintly with strange minerals. Mira gave directions calmly, warning him of dangers only her people would know. At last, the gray clouds of a small planet came into view. As they entered its atmosphere, Ryan felt a strange pull, as if the planet itself carried memory. The surface below revealed wide valleys, forests of silver trees, and rivers that shone under the starlight. It was not a thriving world, but it was alive. They landed in a quiet clearing. The children pressed their faces to the glass, their eyes wide with wonder. Mira whispered something in her own language, a word that sounded like home. When they stepped onto the ground, Mira knelt and pressed her hand to the soil. Tears slipped down her face. This place remembers us, she said. It is not safe forever, but it will give us strength again. Ryan watched her, feeling the weight of her words. He had seen many worlds, but none had stirred such emotion in him. He realized then that Mira and her children were not just survivors. They were the last threads of something precious, something the Empire wanted to erase. The silver trees of the hidden world swayed gently in the wind. Their tall branches shimmered like glass under the pale light of the sky. For a moment, Ryan felt peace. He stood near the ship, breathing the fresh air, something he had not done in weeks. Mira and her children played near the river, their laughter soft but real. The children looked stronger now. They still moved with some weakness, but food and rest had given them new energy. The youngest one, barely able to walk when Ryan first found him, now splashed in the shallow water with wide smiles. Mira watched them closely, her face calm but always alert. Ryan felt something stir in him as he watched. He had spent years in silence with no family or friends, no reason to stay anywhere for long. Now in this strange place he felt like he belonged to something again. But peace in the galaxy never lasted long. The ship's warning system beeped suddenly, sharp and urgent. Ryan turned quickly, his heart tightening. He rushed into the cockpit and checked the screen. A fleet signature appeared on the edge of the system. It was the Empire. Ryan swore under his breath and ran outside. Mira, he called. We have to move now. Mira's face turned pale. She gathered her children quickly, her hands trembling as she pulled them close. They found us. Yes, Ryan said. And they'll be here soon. We can't fight them, not like this. We have to leave. The children clung to Mira as Ryan rushed them aboard the ship. Engines roared to life, and the silver forest below began to blur as they lifted into the sky. The ship pushed through the atmosphere, climbing higher and higher, until the stars appeared again. On the scanner, several ships closed in. Sleek and sharp, painted in black and silver, they carried the mark of the Empire. They moved like predators, swift and merciless. "Hold on," Ryan muttered, gripping the controls. The Empire ships opened fire. Streams of red light cut across the dark, striking dangerously close. Ryan rolled the ship, diving through the gaps. Mira held her children tight as the ship shook under the pressure. "They will not stop," Mira said, her voice heavy with fear. "They will chase us until we are gone." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Not if I can help it." He pulled hard on the controls, sending the ship spinning between asteroids that floated nearby. The Empire ships followed, their weapons flashing in the dark. Ryan's hands moved with steady speed, every turn sharp but controlled. He had flown through worse, but never with lives depending on him like this. The children cried out as the ship jolted. Mira closed her eyes, whispering words in her own language, holding them close. Suddenly, a faint glow spread from her children's small hands. It grew brighter, soft light filling the cabin. Ryan blinked in surprise as the glow spread across the walls like a shield. An enemy blast struck the side of the ship, but instead of tearing through metal, the light flared brighter and absorbed the impact. The ship rocked but did not break. Ryan's eyes widened. "What was that?" Mira gasped, staring at her children. "Their gift." It awakened. The children looked frightened, their little hands still glowing, but the shield remained. The Empire fired again and again, yet the light held, shimmering like a living wall. Ryan did not waste the chance. He pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through the asteroids until the enemy ships lost ground. Finally, he spotted a narrow passage between two massive rocks and dove into it. The Empire ships tried to follow, but the passage was too tight. Two of them collided, bursting into flames. The rest broke off, losing track of Ryan's ship. Silence returned to the cabin, broken only by the heavy breaths of those inside. The glow slowly faded from the children's hands, leaving them weak and tired. Mira cradled them, tears in her eyes. "You saved us," she whispered to them, her voice full of awe. Ryan leaned back, sweat running down his face. His hand still gripped the controls tightly, but his mind kept replaying the image of that light. He had never seen anything like it. "So this is the gift the Empire fears," Ryan said quietly. Mira looked up at him. "Yes, the Alari carry within them a power tied to life itself. When we are cornered, when we are close to losing everything, the gift awakens. That is why the Empire hunts us. They fear what we might become if we rise again." Ryan nodded slowly. It made sense. The Empire would never allow such strength to exist outside its control. But seeing the children, small and innocent, wield such power not for conquest but survival, filled him with anger at the Empire's cruelty. He set the ship on a quiet course away from the battlefield. "They'll be back," he said. "But we'll be ready next time." Mira lowered her head. "You risked your life for us again. Why, Ryan? You owe us nothing." Ryan turned to her, his eyes steady. "Because no one should have to face the stars alone. Not you, not your children." Mira's lips trembled. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, her eyes shining with quiet gratitude. The children soon fell asleep, exhausted from their strange burst of power. Mira covered them with blankets, smoothing their hair with gentle hands. Ryan watched her, realizing how strong she was. Even broken, even hunted, she carried her children forward with every step. As the ship drifted, Ryan thought about his own past. He had grown up on a crowded world, full of noise and machines. His parents had worked hard, but he had always felt like a shadow, unnoticed. That was why he had left, why he had chosen the endless roads of space. But now, watching Mira and her children, he felt something new. He was needed. For the first time in his life, someone looked at him not as a shadow but as a light. Hours later, the ship floated in a quiet region of space. Ryan checked the scanners twice, making sure no enemies followed. The stars stretched endless, calm for now. Mira joined him in the cockpit, her face tired but calm. "They will come again," she said softly. "I know," Ryan replied. "And we'll keep running until we find a place strong enough to hold them off." Mira sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. "When my people were strong, we believed our gift was meant to protect, not destroy. But the Empire turned it into a curse. They made us fear what we are. Yet today my children used it to save us all. Perhaps that is the truth of our gift. Ryan looked at her, then at the stars. Maybe your people need more than safety. Maybe they need hope. Mira's eyes softened. And you, Ryan? You give hope where none was left. The words struck him deeply. He did not know if he deserved them, but he would not forget them. The night stretched on, and the ship continued its quiet flight. The Empire was out there waiting, always searching. But inside that small vessel a bond had formed, fragile yet strong. A bond between a lone human who had once carried no purpose and a broken family carrying the weight of survival. The hidden world stretched below Ryan's ship like a quiet sanctuary. Its silver forests glimmered under the soft light of distant stars. Rivers ran gently through valleys, reflecting the faint glow of moons overhead. For the first time since leaving the barren moon, Ryan felt a small measure of relief. They were safe here, at least for now. He guided the ship to a clearing surrounded by tall crystal-like trees. The ground was solid and the forest seemed alive yet silent. Ryan powered down the engines, listening to the hum fade. For a moment there was nothing but the soft rustle of leaves. Is this safe? Mira asked softly, standing beside him, her children clinging to her skirts. For now, Ryan replied. It will give us time to repair the ship, rest, and plan our next move. Mira nodded and led the children away from the landing site. They explored the edge of the forest carefully, touching the trees and peering at the small glowing plants that dotted the ground. Their laughter was light and cautious, but it filled the clearing in a way that Ryan had not expected. It reminded him of what life could feel like beyond the endless void of space. Ryan opened the ship's hatch and began inspecting the damage. The hull had been scratched and dented during the escape from the Empire ships. The engines were overworked and needed realignment. He took out tools and started working, the steady rhythm of repairs comforting him. Mira approached him, watching quietly. Do you do this often? She asked. Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead. Repairing ships is all I've done for years. Keeps me alive, keeps me moving. But it's lonely work. No one to share it with. Mira looked at him, understanding in her eyes. It must be hard carrying everything alone. He shrugged, focusing on a stubborn panel. It is, but sometimes you find something that makes it worth it. He glanced at her, then at the children playing nearby. I think I found that now. Mira's lips curved slightly. She did not speak, but the look in her eyes said more than words could. Hours passed as Ryan worked, tightening bolts, checking the fuel lines, and running diagnostics. Mira watched him for some time, then moved closer to help with simple tasks. She lifted panels and held tools, learning quickly from his instructions. The children observed from a safe distance, their curiosity mixing with caution. You are patient, Mira said after a while. Many humans would have grown frustrated long ago. Ryan shook his head. I have no choice but to be patient. Lives depend on it. He glanced at her, his expression serious. Including yours. Mira looked down, a faint blush on her cheeks. She had never known a human like him. Someone who risked everything for strangers, yet treated them with quiet respect. It was foreign and comforting at the same time. By nightfall, the repairs were almost complete. The hull was reinforced and the engines aligned for better efficiency. Ryan ran a final check before shutting down the ship for rest. He felt the tension ease slightly. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a breath of relief. Mira led the children to the ship's sleeping area. She tucked them in gently, brushing their hair from their faces. Sleep well, she whispered. Tomorrow we will be stronger. Ryan watched her from the doorway, noting the tenderness in her movements. He had never seen such care directed at something so fragile yet resilient. It reminded him that strength could be gentle. After ensuring the children were asleep, Mira returned to the cockpit. She sat quietly beside Ryan. Thank you for trusting us, she said softly. Ryan glanced at her, surprised. I trust you because you deserve it. You protected your children in ways I could not have imagined. Mira's eyes softened. And you protected us all. Your courage gives hope, not just to us but to all who still survive. Ryan leaned back in his seat, feeling the weight of her words. He had always believed survival was enough, but Mira's words suggested something more. Compassion, courage, and the willingness to stand for others. Perhaps that was what truly made someone strong. The next morning, Ryan woke early to check the ship again. Mira was already awake, feeding the children small meals of preserved fruits and energy bars. Their faces had brightened overnight, their strength returning. Ryan felt a small smile tug at his lips. The children were learning to trust him, and Mira was learning to trust him beyond necessity. As they prepared to leave the clearing, Mira spoke quietly. "There are areas of this world where the Empire cannot track us easily. I know a place nearby where we can hide while we plan our next move." Ryan nodded. "Lead the way." They moved carefully through the forest, the children holding Mira's hands tightly. Ryan stayed close behind, scanning for any signs of danger. The hidden paths Mira led them through were unfamiliar to him, twisting and turning among silver trees and glowing streams. He could see the care she took to keep the children safe, and it impressed him deeply. Finally, they arrived at a secluded valley, surrounded by cliffs and dense vegetation. A small stream ran through the center, and the ground was flat enough to land the ship safely. Mira let the children run to the water, their laughter echoing through the valley. Ryan stepped forward. "This will work. We can stay here for a while." Mira smiled, relief softening her features. "It will give us time to recover, to regain our strength, and perhaps to begin again." Over the next days, Ryan and Mira worked together to repair the ship fully. Ryan taught Mira how to check the systems and run diagnostics. She learned quickly, asking questions and remembering details with surprising accuracy. The children followed, watching the adults closely. Sometimes they tried to mimic Ryan's movements, lifting tools or pretending to adjust panels. Ryan laughed quietly, encouraging them. Their smiles were small victories in a universe that had given them so little. As night fell one evening, Ryan and Mira sat near the edge of the cliff, looking at the stars. The children were asleep, exhausted from the day's play and learning. Mira turned to him, her eyes reflecting the light of the moons. "Ryan," she began softly, "you do not know how much this means."
The children.
"They have seen danger, fear, hunger. But with you, they see something else, safety, strength, hope." Ryan shook his head. "I'm not a hero, I did what I had to do." Mira reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Perhaps not a hero in your eyes, but in theirs, in mine, you are everything we need. You are our light in the darkness." Ryan felt warmth spread through him at her words. He had spent so long running, surviving alone, never imagining he could mean so much to anyone. Yet here, in this quiet valley, he realized that life was not only about surviving. It was about protecting, about standing with others, about giving hope when there was none. The bond between them grew stronger each day. Ryan found himself laughing with the children, teaching them small games and watching them grow more confident. Mira worked beside him, learning, planning, and trusting him in ways she had never trusted anyone before. Together, they were more than just a human and a refugee family. They were a team, a small family formed by circumstance and courage. One evening, as Ryan inspected the ship's engines, the youngest child toddled toward him. "Ryan," he said softly, holding out a small tool he had found. Ryan smiled, taking the tool. "Thank you. You're helping me now." The child beamed, proud. Mira watched from a distance, her heart swelling. She had not imagined a human could teach her children so much without anger or frustration. Yet here he was, patient, kind, strong. Later, as they sat around a small fire near the ship, Mira spoke quietly. "You give us more than safety, Ryan. You give us courage. The Empire may come again, but we will be ready. Together." Ryan nodded, watching the flames dance. "Together," he repeated. He realized that humanity's strength was not only in survival or weapons. It was in the willingness to care, to protect, to stand for those who could not protect themselves. The hidden valley was quiet as dawn broke. Mist curled over the silver grass and the rivers glimmered with early light. Ryan stood near the ship, inspecting the engines one last time before they moved again. Mira and her children were awake, quietly preparing for the day. There was a calm in the air that felt fragile, as if it could be broken at any moment, and it would be. The scanner beeped urgently. Ryan's heart tightened. Multiple ships appeared at the edge of the system. The Empire had tracked them once more. These were no scouts this time. This was a fleet, larger and faster than anything Ryan had seen before. "They've found us," he said quietly. Mira's hands tightened around the children. "We have been waiting for this. They will not stop until all of us are gone." Ryan nodded. "We won't go down without a fight. But we need to be smart. We can't outrun them forever." The children huddled close, their eyes wide but not afraid. Ryan noticed the faint glow that still lingered from the last encounter. It was faint, almost shy, but it was there. The children had learned in some way that their power could protect. "Listen to me," Ryan said, crouching beside them. "Stay close to Mira, trust her and trust each other. You are stronger than you know, your gift. It can save us all." The children nodded, gripping Mira's hands tightly. Ryan climbed back into the cockpit, Mira beside him. The engines roared as the ship lifted, silver forests disappearing below them. The Empire fleet approached quickly, dark and imposing, their weapons ready to fire. Ryan's mind raced. He had no fleet, no army, only a damaged cargo ship, a woman and 3 children. Yet looking at them, he felt something ignite inside him. Courage, determination. Humanity's fire that refused to die. The first shot struck the hull, rattling the ship. Ryan twisted and dove between asteroids, trying to use the terrain to their advantage. The Empire ships followed relentlessly, their fire constant. Mira whispered words in her own language, and the children's hands began to glow brighter. The light spread quickly, forming a shield around the ship that shimmered like liquid silver. Ryan felt the energy pulse through the ship, absorbing the enemy fire. For a moment, the impossible seemed real. A small family, unarmed and fleeing, holding back the power of the Empire. "They are amazing," Mira whispered, holding the children close. "They are saving us." Ryan gritted his teeth, weaving the ship through a narrow canyon. The Empire ships pressed closer, but every time a weapon struck, the children's light flared, deflecting the blasts. The ship shook violently, but it held. One of the larger ships moved ahead to block their path. Ryan realized he could not simply run. He had to fight back, but he had nothing that could match them, except for what was already with him. "Children," Ryan called. "Now focus on protecting us. Don't be afraid." The youngest child hesitated but looked at Ryan. Slowly he raised his hands, the glow intensifying. The other 2 followed, their light merging into one brilliant force. The shield expanded, pushing against the enemy ships. Energy pulsed outward, striking the lead ship. Metal groaned under the power, and the ship spun, its engines failing. Ryan maneuvered quickly, dodging the remaining ships. Mira whispered encouragements, guiding the children as if she could channel their energy. The Empire's fleet fired again, but the children's combined strength created waves of light that deflected every attack. Ryan's hands moved rapidly across the controls. "We can do this," he shouted. "We can survive!" The Empire ships began to falter. Some collided with each other, unable to handle the force of the children's power. Others turned away, retreating in confusion. Ryan realized that this was not just about survival anymore. This was about showing the Empire that they could not destroy what they did not understand. The children's glow grew brighter, their small bodies radiating energy that filled the valley with light. Mira's eyes shone with pride and fear. She had never imagined that her children, so young and fragile, could stand against the Empire itself. Ryan felt his heart swell. Humanity, simple and resilient, had always been underestimated. Yet here he was, a human, standing with this family, facing impossible odds and holding their own. He realized that courage was contagious. The Empire had assumed fear, but instead they met defiance. With one final push, the children released a wave of energy that struck the remaining ships. Engines failed, weapons exploded, and the fleet scattered into the void. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of Ryan's ship. The children collapsed in exhaustion, their glow fading. Mira gathered them, holding each one close. "You are safe now," she whispered. "Thanks to you, thanks to him." Ryan lowered himself into his seat, chest heaving. He looked at the family beside him and felt a warmth that he had never known. He had risked everything, and together they had survived. Together they had defeated the Empire in a way that was small yet powerful, personal yet unshakable. Mira turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "Ryan, you gave us life when none was left. You saved my children, and you saved my people's spirit. I will never forget this." Ryan shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. Your children, they have power that the Empire feared. I only helped them believe in themselves. That is what matters," Mira smiled faintly. "And your courage? That is what gave them strength. Humanity has a fire that cannot be extinguished." The children stirred, looking up at Ryan with wide eyes. They reached out for him, small hands touching his arms. He smiled, lifting them gently. For the first time, he felt truly connected to others, not as a traveler, but as a protector, a friend, and perhaps even family. Rian set the ship on a course for a nearby planet that Mira had discovered on her maps. It was hidden, untouched by the Empire, a place where they could rest and rebuild. The children rested on the seats, their energy spent but their faces peaceful. Mira sat close to them, holding their hands and murmuring quiet words of comfort. As the ship moved through space, Ryan reflected on everything that had happened. He had traveled alone, believing that survival was enough. Yet through compassion, courage, and connection, he had found something greater. He had found purpose. He had found hope. The Empire would come again, that much he knew. But now he understood something important: the strength of humanity, the willingness to protect others, and the courage to stand when it was hardest. These were powers no fleet could destroy. Mira looked at him quietly.
Rand, do you see now?
You are more than a human. You are a beacon. You gave us hope, and that hope will shine for all who follow. Rian smiled softly, watching the stars. I only did what anyone should do. But maybe humanity can be more than survival. Maybe we can inspire. The hidden world approached, its surface lush and quiet. Rivers ran through forests and small mountains rose in the distance. It would be their home, at least for now. The Empire's shadow might always linger. But the family aboard the ship had something the Empire could never touch: courage, unity, and the fire of hope. As the ship touched down gently, Ryan helped the children climb out. Mira followed, holding their hands tightly. Together they stepped onto solid ground. The air was fresh and free, and for the first time in weeks the children laughed without fear. Rian watched them, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. He had saved lives, inspired courage, and witnessed something extraordinary: the power of compassion and the human spirit. He had learned that even in the darkest corners of space, humanity's light could shine, fierce and unyielding. Mira turned to him once more. You gave us life, Ryan. You gave us hope. Your courage will guide us forward, always. Ryan nodded, smiling faintly. Then we moved forward, together. And together they did. The hidden world would be their refuge, their sanctuary. The Empire might return, but they had seen that courage, kindness, and unity could overcome even the greatest odds. Humanity's flame burned brightly, not in weapons, but in hearts that refused to surrender. As the sun rose over the valley, Ryan, Mira, and the children walked together, stepping into a new beginning, stronger and braver than ever before. They were not just survivors. They were a spark in the darkness, a promise that no matter how vast the universe, hope would always endure.